Welcome. On behalf of the Southeastern Wisconsin chapter of PRSA, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, How Nonprofit Groups Evolve Their Communication Strategies During COVID-19. My name is Mike Flugheft. I'm the Public Relations Director at Water Street Creative, and I've been on the PRSA board probably before some of you were born. But I'm glad to have the opportunity to welcome a really great panel today. I want to thank them for taking the time to share their insights with us over the challenges and some of the wins that they've had over the past few months. It's been certainly a difficult time for everyone. We have Hector Colon with us. He is the President and CEO of Lutheran Social Services. Don Klein is here, PRSA member, former board member, former president. Senior Director of Public Affairs for Bethesda Lutheran Communities. And Ann Metcalf, the Managing Director of the Milwaukee Ballet, is also here with us. So let's get started. We have about an hour. As Catherine had mentioned, please keep yourself on mute, and you can submit questions via the chat, or hopefully by the end of the discussion that we have with the panel, some of the prepared questions that we have, we'll have time for people to ask questions, and we'll have some interaction at that point. And we'll try to keep this to an hour if possible. I know people have another Zoom call to get to, I'm sure. So obviously, COVID-19 has really impacted all of us, virtually everyone, how we work, especially, as evidenced by this call today. So nonprofits were certainly not immune to that impact, and in some ways, we're even more vulnerable to the impact of COVID-19 than some of the other organizations that were out there. So I will give each of our panelists a chance to kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the aspects of their communications efforts. And then, as I said, we'll have time for questions at the end of it. So let's start with Hector. Hector Colon, tell us a little bit about LSS, Hector, and then how your team kind of worked to engage clients and staff. How did you pivot during COVID? And what did you do to engage your donor network?
Thank you very much. Very happy to be on this program with all of you. First, LSS really empowers people to live their best lives. Those with, in some cases, significant challenges, such as a child in crisis who has nowhere to turn, a family in turmoil that might be facing eviction, someone struggling with addiction or mental illness, an elderly person that just needs a little bit of help to live independently or successfully in the community, or a refugee that's fleeing from war and persecution. LSS has been the place to turn to for these individuals for over 138 years. Last year, we served over 30,000 individuals, 91% of which have indicated that we improved their quality of life. So I'm so humbled and honored to be surrounded by over 800 employees here in this organization that make me a better person each and every day. This pandemic was unprecedented. We were faced to lose $1 million of revenue per month as a result of this pandemic. And I want to give a shout out to King Communications, as well as our internal leaders, Michelle Naples, Sharon, and Diane, who really set up a good foundation for us to be able to move forward with effective communication strategies. And so starting off with our staff, we started a daily LSS response team that met daily, that looked at best practices with CDC guidelines and making sure we were bringing those best practices to the organization. We also made sure that we were fielding questions from our staff and providing them with the most reliable, factual information on a daily basis. But then also just being there to support them, to understand how they were doing personally as well as professionally. For our clients, we quickly, it was so invigorating to see our staff find creative vehicles to stay in contact with our staff, such as Facebook or other creative apps. And then we pivoted towards telehealth. So we had zero telehealth when this pandemic hit. Now it makes up 80% of our community-based services. So that was an important vehicle to make sure we were reaching out to thousands of people that need us now more than ever. And lastly, our partners. We've had frequent communication with our partners and talked about our challenges with a big O, not the small O, LSS challenges, but our challenges in the state, in our respective counties. And those those conversations led to some good opportunities. For example, we have developed an eviction prevention program in collaboration with a couple counties, also through federal funding, or a state program with on our federal presence, and also just collaborating with other nonprofit organizations such as Catholic charities through our homeless services. So those are some of the things we've done with our staff, with our clients, as well as with our partners.
Hector, the telehealth aspect of that is interesting. From an infrastructure technology perspective, how challenging or difficult was that?
So it was challenging. There was an investment of about $250,000 to have the capacity and the ability to be able to move that forward. But I have to say, it seems seamless of how quickly our staff and our organization was able to pivot to make sure that, and they did it with the love and compassion they have in their hearts, to make sure that we can continue to have contact with those individuals that really need us now more than ever. So within a month, we were able to pivot towards the telehealth platform, but it required a lot of effort amongst our internal staff and an investment of about $250,000.
Do you expect that move to engaging folks virtually is going to be something that sticks around for the long term versus, I mean, I guess I don't want to jump ahead, but it seems to me like that might be one of those moments. It's like, hey, this is working. People have adapted to it very quickly. Can we continue that?
Yeah, great question. I think it should continue. Before this pandemic, we didn't have the reimbursement through Medicaid that would allow us to do this. So it took for this pandemic for us to get reimbursement. I envision that, we are human services. So there is a personal connection and touch that is part of who we are that I think is necessary moving forward. So I kind of envision a combination of in-person as well as telehealth, and we're actually pivoting towards that right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Hector. Let's move on to Don. And Don, tell us a little bit about Bethesda and what you do. You're still in the human services, but a different group of people than what Hector and his team help.
Absolutely. And just a quick shout out to PRSA. Always good to be with my PRSA friends and family here. Been a longtime supporter of the organization, so great to be here. So Bethesda is an organization, kind of like LSS in the fact that we've been around for a long time. Founded in 1904 in Watertown, Wisconsin. We support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities here in Wisconsin and in 12 other states. So we primarily work with adults of all different types of disabilities. We provide residential support. So we have people who live, work in the homes and do everything from cook meals for people to take them to their appointments, to educational employment support. So we help people find jobs in the community. We also provide faith connections as well. So, making sure that they are connected to a church of their choice if they choose to do so. As you can imagine, this is a very vulnerable population to begin with, a lot of comorbidities in terms of, getting COVID. So when COVID happened, we knew we needed to act quickly, and we did. We basically shut down any visitors to our programs as of the middle of March. Which was a big deal for not only the people we support and their families, their parents, guardians, but also our employees too. It's just an entirely different way of working, basically like overnight. So we needed to really ramp up our communications around that so that everybody understood what was happening, then and there. And that was how we got started with our town hall meetings, which I think was probably the biggest success that we've had so far. So since the middle of March, our president and CEO, Mike Thurtle, has hosted about 80 town hall meetings, 5-hour-long town hall meetings with employees, with parents and guardians, also with our donors, to keep them informed. And this was really important early on when information was changing. There was dramatic things happening, like we didn't have enough PPE, protective equipment for people. So how are we going to get that out to people? How are we going to let parents and guardians know what they can or can't do? How can they communicate? Things like that. So really ramp that up right away and tried to explain that what we were doing was for everybody's best interest from a health and wellness standpoint. So that continued, and we've been doing those on an ongoing basis a few times a week from there. The other thing we had to think about, though, is if we have people with disabilities in a home environment, they're not able to get out of the home. They're not able to go to their work programs or community programs. So what can we do to keep them active and engaged? And that was another thing that we really focused on, was our virtual programming. So much like we were doing Zoom meetings, and I should have mentioned that, Zoom meetings for Mike's town halls, we also put into place a whole suite of programs to be done over Zoom, everything from cooking classes to dance parties to prayer services, whatever it might be, to give people in the home something to do rather than just sit and watch TV. I mean, they're able to get up, they're doing things. It's not exactly the same as being, out in the community, but it helped. It was also another way, using Zoom, to connect people we support with their parents and guardians. So they couldn't see them in person, but they would be able to talk virtually, and that's been well received. So that's kind of where we've been in the last few months. It's been a crazy few months, that's for sure.
So I'm sensing a theme here that obviously it probably makes sense. Technology, using technology, finding ways to adapt it to your particular audience, and then leveraging that seems to be one of the strong things that has worked for you guys. So, Don, what's your favorite dance party tune?
Well, we just had 70s dance party. They're every Friday night at 6:30 Central Time, and we have one of our leaders who always dresses up and guides everybody through that. So we had ABBA going. We had a lot of really fun things. So
very, very good. I could just see
the parents like it too.
In a 70s fro wig, you would.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's fun, and you know what? And it keeps it light for people too. These are scary times, so it's good to do that.
Very good. Well, so a different type of dance party. Let's move on to Ann.
Nicely done.
Who is the managing director of the Milwaukee Ballet, and people are familiar with the Milwaukee Ballet probably primarily for the public performance aspect of the ballet, but and the Milwaukee Ballet is certainly more than that, and particularly during the COVID-19 situation, you were impacted, obviously, as from a public performance perspective, but also on all the other aspects of the business. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Milwaukee Ballet has 3 parts to its mission. Obviously, our on-stage work is what most people know us for. We usually do about 40 performances on the main stage each year for around 60,000 patrons. The other 2 parts are our community engagement programs. So we reach around 30,000 people a year through programs like Releve, which is with MPS schools, Residence, where we actually go to schools and teach ballet. We have programs for children with varying degrees of disabilities called the Tour de Force program. So there's a whole range. We go to senior centers. We have a second company of dancers who performs our outreach activities. The third part of our business is really education, and we have a school and academy for around 600 families. So we have our main studio, which is the Baumgartner Center for Dance, which we opened in September, as well as 2 locations in Brookfield and Fox Point. So when we shut down in March, it wasn't just the cancellation of 2 major performances, which was the first time in 50 years that's ever happened. But we also had to shut down our school and academy. And that was, on the verge of, all the showcases and casting in our main stage performances. So for us, I guess, from an earned revenue point of view, where the school actually accounts for 1/3 of our operating budget in tuition revenue, that was a significant focal point for us, because we are very fortunate to be in a new space that is perfect for social distancing. Our new center has 7 studios. It has 8 feet wide hallways, brand new HVAC system, multiple entry and exit points. So we were fully focused on our school families and getting that school open again. We had a summer intensive program in July for 4 weeks for around 90 students. The summer intensive for a ballet company is kind of like the nutcracker on the stage. It's an opportunity to make revenue through dorm, tuition, as well as international and national students. Normally we'd host around 150 students. We had 90 this year. They were all local, and they had to be situated within an hour-and-a-half drive of the center for reasons of health and safety. And we successfully pulled that off, and we're probably one of only 5 ballet companies in the States that could do that. So I guess our journey towards, July was, in terms of communication, was very squarely with our school families and giving them confidence that we would be able to open. And that was a pretty heavy lift, because in that period, that you were talking about, I think Hector and Don as well, you were finding out everything was evolving daily. So now when we're reopening schools, we have so much more information that's scientifically based and accepted. Whereas, April, May, June even, that information was kind of what the best that you had today was probably the best that the CDC had as well. So we really focused on our health and safety committee with our parents. And so that with our donor base, we have a lot of individual donors. As a company, we were very cognizant of the need of essential services like Hector's and Don's organizations. I think the arts, is fortunate to have a different kind of donor base where they're usually large individual donors and givers. UPAF is one of our biggest donors, and we obviously have some month-on-month support from them. But we did consciously give space to those asks in those months following kind of shutdown, because of the fact that we felt it would be a little tone deaf to be chasing individual donations on top of social services, which was clearly an essential need, remains an essential need. But yeah, that was part of the tone for us, was just to make sure that we were being sensitive and going to our inner circle of donors first before we did any broad reach.
So you had mentioned in our initial conversation that another challenge, and I think I can put this to the entire panel, the impact on internal communications and employees, downsizing. I mean, and you had said you went from 100 staff members down to 16 instantly. So why don't each of you talk a little bit about the challenges from an internal communication standpoint and dealing with your staff as well.
Yeah, so Milwaukee Ballet normally has around 150 people on its books, and the permanent staff are around 30 to 40. But we have, if you think about, we have dancers, we have around 25 professional company. They represent about 16 different countries. We have a second company of dancers. We have teachers and accompanists. We keep a full orchestra, Milwaukee Ballet Orchestra, one of the few companies in the nation to do that. So in total, we were supporting part-time and seasonally many people who, once a performance was called off, really we had nothing to give them. So being able to keep in close contact with them was so key. We did our best with the relief package for them before the CARES Act kicked in. Once we were able to get the Paycheck Protection Program, we brought everyone back on salary for 8 weeks, even if we had nothing for them to do, because the future was so uncertain. So being very transparent with them, we were conscious about not over-promising, but behind the scenes working as hard as we could to support our artists who today are faced with, an unemployment situation that with no federal bonuses, and, we don't know when we're going to be able to get back on stage.
Yeah, I can say that, very hard times, having to, go through the furlough process, and then even more permanent layoffs for our staff. We had to, we moved forward first with furloughs with a little over 60 individuals. We have brought about a little over half of those individuals back. And we have frequent communication with them throughout the process. In fact, I even have called those that are permanently laid off. I made an effort to give them a call, and haven't called them all just yet. but I've called many of them just to thank them and to show appreciation. In some cases, some of these individuals were with the organization for a long time, making a difference in the lives of so many people in our society and contributing to the value that LSS brings. So we felt compelled to reach out to them, even if they might not be coming back to the organization today. Maybe they'll come back at a future date, but we felt it was important to reach out to them as well.
Yeah, from our perspective, a little bit different in that we, didn't really need to furlough anybody or lay anyone off, at the moment, just because you think about the services that we provide, very hands-on, labor intensive, out in the homes, doing what we need to do. We actually found that we needed more people. So we started hiring direct support professionals. These are the folks in the homes doing the work. And it was interesting because these are, jobs that don't pay a ton, and they are, they're very demanding jobs. You have to be the kind of the right person for it. You have to believe in the mission and what you're doing. So hard to fill, but in the environment where a lot of people are being displaced, we actually found that there was more interest in these positions just because of that. And it was good to see that there were people taking a look at us that otherwise might not do that. I mean, for bad reasons, of course, with everything that was going on. We have found it, but then of course, all staffing up and having more people in the homes, especially if there's people called out with sickness or whatever it might be, very, very costly. And so that's something we have to look at. It's like, how do we keep it going? How do we keep supporting people with manpower, PPE, all the things that you need, but then and just make sure they're well taken care of, but at the same time pay our bills.
That's an interesting point, Don, that you mentioned, that you have saw people step forward and be willing to step up into positions, take positions that may not on the surface look like they would be might be a tough position to fill. Yep. So for each of our panelists, is there some key takeaway or lesson learned or aha moment, kind of like what Don had just said? And Don, you have to come up with another one now. That you could share with the group, a kind of a surprise or key thing that you would like to emphasize?
Sure, I can start. A key learning for us is very people-centric, very much location-based. And for the longest time, we've had the ability to communicate via Zoom or Skype or whatever it might be. And it was always seen as sort of a last resort, like, okay, if you can't make the meeting, join us this way. We have found, though, that because we were forced into using this, that people love it. It is not exactly the same as being in the office with people or seeing people, but there's a lot of good to it. And whether it's been the town halls and having the connections with the parents and the employees that way, or making the virtual program that we're doing. I mean, these are things that are going to outlast this COVID pandemic. I mean, this has changed our organization for the better in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I could share some thoughts for our staff. Just the frequent communication that we've had with them has really, I've seen us be one LSS more than I've seen in my 3 years that I've been with the organization. And so, where we're really looking out for the greater good of each other and ultimately the organization. So that's really been invigorating. So our learning there is, how do we continue to have the frequent communication and getting us together to see how we're doing, both personally as well as professionally. So we're, maybe it's not daily, but more frequent than we've been doing it prior to the pandemic. Then for our clients, just thinking how quickly we innovated and we're creative of looking at Facebook and other apps and telehealth, and how do we embed that creativity and that innovation just more strategically in the organization on a moving forward basis. And lastly, our partners. Relationships are key, and all have been affected in this pandemic, and in some cases significant ways. And it's really easy to think about ourselves during these challenges, right? our organization is really led by a servant leadership philosophy. So it's in our hearts to try to put others first, but that's not always easy. In fact, we fall short, just like anybody else. So we want to challenge ourselves to really always lead and communicate and demonstrate with our actions on how we put others first.
Don, I'm going to give the other side of technology here, which was when we shut our school down, we went virtual for our ballet classes. And our director said that it's like trying to teach swimming through a screen, so for ballet, I'm going to tell you, because my son is a ballet dancer, he's 15 and hopes to do that professionally. The joy that I have in watching ballet is that it is absolutely low tech, and there is never going to be any AI that replaces a person, performing on stage. So for us, the virtual learning was something that we did and did really well very quickly, but I'm not sure, and it will remain a hybrid for us as we go through COVID, but there is nothing to replace getting back in a studio with sprung floors and the space. We can't replicate that remotely. So we did, the learning, I guess, for us is that there was for a while, a big push towards digital transformation of ballet. And whilst being able to watch it digitally and sharing that widely has been amazing. And hopefully many more people have seen something they've never seen before on social media from different countries, if not locally. We're happy in our new studios for sure, and trying to get back there. The other thing that I guess would be a learning for us is that, well, for me personally, the governance around a nonprofit, as Hector and Don will know, is sometimes slow, with various committee structures and a board who needs to make a lot of final decisions. And so, for me at the beginning, it was very much a case of trying to make decisions quite quickly to keep pace with what was happening. However, the reality is that leaving it as long as you can before making that final decision has, I'm going to say, almost always paid off to our benefit through this crisis. So at the beginning, it felt like it was like treacle, and we needed, staff are demanding, am I still going to have my health care? Am I going to come back on next week? When does my furlough end? But as we've gone through this, I think that's taught us a lot about just being patient and not making hurried decisions. And I think that's paid off for us.
So we have a number of questions that are coming in from the audience now. One of them, I think, is something that each of you can address is, are there some ideas or best practices for engaging donors that came through this process? I know, Anne, you specifically said you had some thoughts on that, so maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, we made a conscious effort from the get-go not to kind of do dark abyss kind of asks, and to retain what we as a company believe to be our brand values of being uplifting and inspirational. And so we were very much about retaining optimism in the way that we wrote to our donors. So far, like, optimistic but realistic, but definitely not coming from a place of panic. And then a little bit towards creating space too for others in the community to fundraise. We wanted to be cautious about going with a specific ask rather than, oh my gosh, this has happened, please everyone throw money at us because I'm not sure what we need it for yet, but we're going to need it. Which, frankly was the case. But to me, I think as a donor, it resonates much more strongly to have that. Is it a relief package of what value and what will that do for your company? Is it the fact you need streaming technology and that's a value of $50,000? So we took a little bit of time to get that right. For us, we obviously have incredible ability to capture creative imagery, which is inspiring with our dancers. And so where we had our most recent campaign was a summer campaign, a matching one. We were able to use our dancers when they were back on payroll to be able to create a lot of content, which we've stacked up and can keep using. And to do that, we actually created a network of teams, which was run centrally by our marketing director. So Milwaukee Ballet at Home had different home teams, and each of those was challenged with creating specific content with a video maker, you know, a couple of dancers and an artistic kind of overview as well.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about our fundraising and our donor interactions. So just to put some context here, our organization was facing to lose $1 million of revenue per month when this pandemic hit, which was really devastating to the organization. But we made significant reductions on the expense side. Executive officers took a voluntary pay cut. We had to move forward, unfortunately, with some furloughs and other expense reduction strategies. And then on the revenue side, we implemented telehealth. So I think our donors really appreciated. We communicated those to our donors to see the significant things we've done to position our organization correctly. But we still had a gap. And we were reluctant at first to approach our donors because, you know, we were worried about them. You know, maybe they've been impacted by the virus personally, or their businesses have been affected. So we led with that in mind, and really looking out for our donors, asking them if they were okay, and if they needed us, we're here for them. And then we also implemented email communications with our donors and text to donate for fear that we could spread the virus via regular mail. So that was something we originally did with them, and we communicated that to them as well. So they're very appreciative of those proactive steps. And then we shared our stories about our clients who in some cases had significant challenges before this pandemic. And this pandemic in many cases made those challenges even worse. And so we shared that with them. We started an LSS response fund, and so humbled and honored to say that we received over $250,000 for that. And fundraising is up this year compared to last year at this point in time. We're pretty optimistic that we'll end the year better where we were last year. So on behalf of LSS, I want to thank all those generous donors who made contributions that really help us live our mission to act compassionately, serve humbly, and lead courageously in all of the services that we provide to help some of the most vulnerable in our community.
Yeah, and I mean, when we began thinking about all the different audiences that we need to talk to, I mean, donors was right there at the top of the list, and we made sure that we did a few town halls with them. So just making sure that they had the opportunity to hear directly from Mike about what was happening with the organization, the financial challenges we were getting just because of what was happening with COVID, and you know what would be in jeopardy potentially if we weren't able to secure enough funds from them. And you know, again, it was sort of threading the needle. It was not saying, it was not all doom and gloom. It was very realistic, but it, you know, it was not too optimistic either. It was saying, this is the situation, here are the facts, here are the numbers, and why we really need your support. And those town halls were well attended, and gave some opportunity for some of our development officers to follow up with phone calls. It's been really tough just because people can't go see each other in person right now. And a lot of our donor base is elderly too. So of course we don't want to, you know, cause any problems or anything like that from a health standpoint. So did give them some opportunities to do some outreach. The other thing that we did, which I think was really a good idea and something that I would recommend, is we did a phone tree, and we called pretty much all of our donor lists at some point in the last couple months. Just broke the list apart. Everybody got like 20 names to call just to check in on them. And these could be people that gave as little as, you know, $10 or $20 just to say, we're still here. We appreciate what you've done for us in the past. If there's anything we can do for you or your loved ones, let us know. And that was really well received too. It was something that a lot of times you would make these calls and people would be like, you're thanking me for donating and you're not asking me for anything. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. And it's just such a refreshing change of pace that I think it kind of takes them aback a little bit, but I think they appreciate the fact that we're doing that. So those were a few of the ways that we tried to stay in touch with our donors.
Very good. So I have a question about, if each of your organizations had a crisis communication plan in place prior to this, and if so, how did that help you from a pre-planning perspective, and kind of how much did you use that through COVID, or was COVID completely so different that it didn't help that much? I'd be curious to hear what you had to say.
Sure, I can start with that one. So yeah, we definitely have a communication or a crisis plan that's in place. It anticipated elements of what was going on with COVID in terms of keeping in touch with stakeholders, assessing the facts, creating an incident command team, which we did, and all those things got done, and it got done very quickly, which worked out well. And I think the fact that the whole team came together and quickly and realized that we had to work together and keep the lines of communication open, that worked out really, really well. I think we've learned a lot of things in the past few months that we can document and put into a refined crisis plan going forward. There's been tons of learnings here that I think we're still uncovering as we go here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was great that we had a communications plan in place. It gave us a good foundation to be able to work through this pandemic. But we're learning each and every day, and we feel that this pandemic is unprecedented, right? We didn't, this was uncharted territory for all of us. So we learned each and every day, and I think we can strengthen our crisis communication plan as a result of this.
Yeah, we did not have a crisis communication plan in place to the extent, beyond a basic level. So certainly nothing sophisticated. So, for us, we have some very bright minds on our board of directors. One of them is head of corporate communication at Baird. He is someone who is very generous with his time and works with us quite closely when we do have any PR or kind of crisis issues to go through. So I think for us, we met almost weekly with our executive committee. That group of varying skill sets and tenure and law, gave us that kind of checkpoint, I guess, to make sure that what we were intending to send out to subscribers or press also calibrated with what else was happening in the community at the time. So I think there's not too much we would do differently, but this one was, being a case that we've never cancelled a performance in 50 years. That alone from a ticketing standpoint was Ticketmaster, which is our platform, clearly had no functionality to support the way to ask a ticket buyer to donate a ticket back. And that was for us a huge issue because we held that revenue and likely had spent it. So, asking our patrons to think about donating the value of their ticket back to us meant that we could retain that revenue. So there was technology issues just so much as even communication.
So there's a question from the audience that talked a little bit about how you communicated with your board, considering the fact that this was such a fluid situation and decisions were being made. I think there was a reference, and you said, sometimes waiting was better. But in the light of the fact that everybody's looking for an answer now, how did you communicate with your boards? What were some of the things that you were able to do to make sure that they were on board with the decisions that were being made?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was difficult because the ballet world has a industry group called Dance USA, and we were meeting weekly. So my counterparts and also the artistic directors of those companies. And so it was interesting because we all had a very realistic approach to what needed to happen from a furlough point of view with staff and what was consistent with what all of our counterparts in the country were doing. But there was a great divide sometimes between what we knew to be true and what the board on the outside perhaps felt was not so much necessary, but emotionally could deal with. So we were a little more emotionally kind of armed to what needed to happen. And so were our artists, frankly. So that was, I guess, the more difficult part, was kind of bridging that gap between the industry and those who work in many other corporate worlds to understand that yes, these really tough steps need to be taken now because we don't have the cash reserves to support keeping these folks on. So I think for them, all of such super smart folks, it was just really being able to talk in their language about the arts and make sure that they understood that we weren't out on our own here. This was a national kind of approach amongst all of our companies. So that helped actually positioning what we were recommending to them.
Yeah, so for us, when the pandemic hit, we convened both of our boards, our foundation board and operating board, to let them know the impact that we were going to face as an organization. We laid out that we're going to lose $100 million of revenue per month. And we laid a framework of how we were thinking of moving forward. And they really emboldened and empowered us to really make decisions that were prudent for the staff, for the people that we serve, as well as the long-term longevity of the organization. We had maybe an additional meeting to kind of share with them. Once the first meeting was to share with them the impact. Then the second meeting, which was maybe just a couple weeks later, a few weeks later, to let them know our decision on how we're going to move forward with furloughs and layoffs and those kind of things. And again, I really felt empowered and emboldened by them that they allowed us to make those decisions. You know, I did keep in frequent contact with my board chair, as well as a couple other members of the executive committee, and that's still ongoing.
Yeah, definitely. From our perspective, our board's been right there. I know Mike and our board president, they are in, if not daily communication, it's several times a week, just keeping up to speed, certainly on the financials and the operations things, but just also the people. How many people do we have that have maybe tested positive or might be in a hospital, because we've had that. And our board is very much into learning those facts, and they know a lot of the people we support by
I think Don froze a little on us there. You still there, Don? All right, hopefully he'll come back. So one of the questions specifically came in regarding, I think we already touched on this briefly, but internal communications with employees. Were there any specific tactics that you felt were particularly effective? Hector, why don't we start with you?
I would just say that the frequent communication regarding, especially in the beginning, CDC guidelines and best practices, and really leading with making sure that we were putting their health and safety as a #1 priority. But then also, there were lots of questions they had, questions we had, and we developed an FAQ process, and in some cases we weren't able to answer those questions right away, and they really respected that, because we didn't want to shoot from the hip. We wanted to make sure that we had the most accurate and factual information before we delivered it to them. So they appreciated that authenticity, and we developed trust with them through that process. So that FAQ was something that was important, because especially in the beginning, there were lots of questions that came forth. Now, not so many. In fact, there's not many on a daily basis to where they used to be. But that FAQ and that frequent communication with the staff, I think, has been very helpful for us.
Yeah, I would echo that completely. And, for us to that frequent communication and trust, also letting them know their milestones that you need to work through. So I can tell you the answer to, will I have health insurance after this date? I will know that after this board meeting, that's when we're looking at it. I mean, we were very clear with people about those kind of trigger points. And we continue to do that as a company. We're budgeting on a quarterly cash flow basis. So each quarter, you know, we will have those decisions. And I think the staff understand that, which has been helpful.
Well, and certainly it sounds like the frequent communication and as Hector said, the upfront, you know, being transparent with the FAQ probably made it easier to deliver some of those tough messages that needed to be delivered. Were there any specific tactics that you used to deliver those difficult messages? I mean, it's hard for people, and I think, you know, in the midst of a crisis like this, to hear that they're being furloughed is probably not the thing that folks want to hear. Any insights on delivering those tough messages?
Yeah, I think for us, it's just leading with a servant-led heart and authentic compassion. And so my staff exude that each and every day. So, you know, they're tough decisions. But I have to tell you that some of those individuals that I have called that are no longer with the organization, they have been truly inspiring. You know, one person was crying and just because I called her, and she was so thankful that I would call her because she's no longer with the organization. Another individual said, man, I have no regrets, and LSS was a great organization, and I learned so much. And he already had another job, and he was actually moving to another state, and he was just so thankful from the, and he was very complimentary with the values that LSS has. So, you know, a lot of it's how you approach things. It's not the what you do, it's how you do it. And I have to say that I'm surrounded by a great organization that is filled with compassion.
Ann or Don, did you have anything to add to that specific area? Otherwise, quite frankly, I wish there were more CEOs that were here that could hear what you said, Hector.
I know, right?
Because having been involved with a number of downsizings, both on the communications end and being downsized myself, that tends to be a vacuum when it comes to people who are willing to communicate with someone if they're not going to be there, because it's naturally an uncomfortable situation for people to be in. But I think your point is very well taken. I think a little bit of communication can go a long way from a personal and a professional perspective for the organization. So, for that.
Yeah.
Don, did you have anything? I know we want to welcome back. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Remember, I said technology was our friend, not so much. If the question is around kind of like, you know, difficult conversations, you know, I think, you know, probably the biggest one for us has been parents and guardians who haven't been able to see their loved ones. And I think, you know, every time we have a parent guardian call, there's always an anguished parent on the line who talks about, can I just see them for a few minutes? Can I wave through the window? Can I knock on the window? Can I do anything? And then as we've started to open things up to allow in-person visits, we've had to then dial that back a little just because COVID spikes. So you're taking away things from people, or, you know, another thing people want to do is they want to take their loved one home or take them shopping, or then we have to tell them no. And it's very, very hard. And these calls, I mean, it's so impassioned, like, just please help me out here. And again, I mean, we come at it from a place of compassion, and we always ground it in the fact that, you know, if we allow this, you know, we're putting other people in jeopardy potentially. We're putting the people in the homes. We're putting our staff who we want to keep safe. And by and large, people have gotten the message. They get it, even to the point where sometimes we'll have a parent who is really going, you know, just so upset about things, and another parent will jump in and say, hey, I understand, but these guys are doing the right thing. And when you can get that kind of, like, you know, support from people that are, you know, you're serving, I mean, that's been really, really helpful.
Very good. So we have time for about 2 more questions, I think, before we have to wrap for today. So one of them, I think, makes sense from a broader perspective. What would be your most surprising positive outcome? I mean, it's easy to look at a situation like this and say there hasn't been any positive outcomes, but I've already heard a couple of things come through this. But what would you say was your most surprising outcome from an overall perspective and from a communications perspective?
Well, for us, one of the most surprising things and inspiring things for us is how quickly the organization pivoted.
Mhm.
And I remember talking to the board saying that it's likely we're going to have a loss this year, or break even at best. And today, I believe that we're going to actually meet and exceed our budget as a result of all the significant changes that we've made, innovation with the telehealth, the expense reductions, but also through the generous support of our donors. So we're actually feeling like we're even stronger today than we were prior to the pandemic. But the thing to keep in mind here is that things can change in a day. You know, if somebody gets the COVID, one of our clients within one of our residential facilities, and you have to lock down that facility over a year, you're talking millions of dollars of impact. Or one of our staff gets affected. I'm so thankful to God that we've been so blessed that those type of things just haven't happened for our organization. So we feel very lucky.
And I would agree. I think, the big thing that we found is just, even though we're spread out across the country, in small teams all over the place, from California to New Jersey and Wisconsin, I mean, just the teamwork that we've seen when the chips were down and we needed to do something. I mean, everybody would pull extra shifts. And these folks, DSPs in the homes would definitely do that. I mean, even our head of sourcing took a truck full of masks and drove it to across the 2 states over in the middle of the night, just because they didn't have enough to get them through. And it's that kind of thing that's really heartening. It just, it speaks to the quality of the people who work for our organization and their belief in the mission and in the people that we support. So that's been really, really eye-opening. And I mean, it's just affirmed so many good things about the organization.
For us, I guess, thinking about a little less warm outcome is for us learning or understanding our costs. I think that's been a very important lesson out of this for our company, because when we were modeling so many different scenarios of when we may reopen, which show to put in, what show costs more, what costs less, how much revenue could we generate if we can only fill 30% of the venue with audience members versus 70%. That's given us a kind of set of tools now, which is going to serve us so well for future years, because we really had to take apart everything that we did from a production standpoint to understand the costs. So if nothing's happening and we have to slot in the nutcracker, what does that cost us, from dancer salary to backstage to venue rental? And that's something we hadn't done before as a company. And so I think a positive outcome from this is really us better understanding, I guess, what it takes to put work on stage, the value of our community engagement as a platform for funding, and also our school, which before was a little bit, it broke even, and it's an incredible facility, but perhaps was a little overshadowed sometimes by what's happening on stage. And now we've given it such a great push, but I think that's an area of growth for us as well. So, yeah.
Okay, we got a couple minutes left. I think I'll let each of you have an opportunity. Obviously, we're not going to be in, hopefully not, pandemic mode for forever. Hopefully, just a short period of time. What does the future hold for each of your organizations coming out of this?
Well, for LSS, so Wisconsin and Upper Michigan, I think the future is so bright. It's so exciting to see this organization evolve as one LSS, with everybody supporting one another in order to achieve the greater good for the staff, for our clients, and really the long-term viability of this organization. So I think that this pandemic truly has made us a stronger organization, and that there's lots of learnings that we have experienced that we want to keep elevating in the years to come, and it's going to make us much stronger.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think our organization is stronger, our team is stronger. We are poised for good things once we get past a few financial hurdles. And we are doing a lot of innovations, a lot of things with smart home technology and building new residential communities in different states. I mean, these are things that go beyond the group homes, and they are things that are going to continue and kind of are the future of supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Once we can get past COVID, I think it's going to be just a great future for everybody involved.
For performing arts, we were one of the first to close and maybe one of the last to reopen in terms of stage work. So we are fully focused on our school right now, reopening in September for all classes in 3 branches. We are on the road to recovery to get our dancers back in the studios, and Milwaukee Ballet is making an announcement about that next week as to our programming for the rest of this year. So still a lot of work to do to get dancers back in the rehearsal studio together, partnering, being able to work together as a group. That health and safety aspect through their union has just kind of brought the guidelines forward to us this week, which gives us a great platform to move forward with. So yeah, that's our next challenge, is getting dancers who aren't quarantined together as couples back in the studio and being able to dance as a group.
You have the Milwaukee Ballet bubble. They can all live together.
Correct.
Exactly.
I would like to thank all of you, Hector, Ann, and Don, for spending your time with us today. I believe this is very helpful and informative. This is the first webinar that we put on through PRSA Southeastern Wisconsin, and I saw quite a few people come. So there's only a few left here now, but quite a few people did come through, so I think it was successful. We are planning to do another webinar. It will be on September 9th from noon to 1:30, and our Diversity Inclusion Committee will be doing a discussion about where we stand as it relates to diversity inclusion in the workplace, and that's a free webinar to members and non-members. So watch for communications surrounding that. And unless anybody has any other final comments, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Enjoy the beautiful day outside and stay safe.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.